Hey everybody, on this video I'm going to talk about how I determine if a product is good to sell on a marketplace like Amazon. I call this my Marfan strategy. Check it out. So one of the biggest questions that's brought up constantly is how do we know what to sell? How do we know what to sell? How do we know what to sell? There's so many products that are saturated. There's so many products that have a good opportunity, but maybe are really difficult to sell. You know, they're hazmat or they're super oversized. Or maybe there are products like my Yeti products that people are looking for. They're in demand, very little competition. Those are great products to sell, right? There's a lot of people also that think there's like a magic solution. There's an algorithm. There's a spreadsheet with pivot tables. We plug in all this information. And at the end of all this algorithmic computation, it pops out and says, yes, this is a good product to sell. That would be really, really nice if that were the case. I remember a few years ago, there were software companies that were putting out, tools where you type in a keyword and it gives you like a thumbs up or a thumbs down or a 5-star great product. I never really believed in all that because a lot of those algorithms and all those decisions were based on existing sales, meaning it could be really saturated. Also, I don't feel like there's any one way to say, yes, this works. There are very, very saturated competitive products that I could make work if I had a big enough budget and I could, do a lot of search, find, buys, and I could do a lot of PPC spend. There's also products that, I can sell very easily with low search volume, meaning low sales volume. So will I make money on it? Can I make an extra $2,000, $3,000 a month? Sure. But there are a lot of people that call that a fail because it's not enough money, right? So it's a very subjective term, what's good or what's not. Generally, though, the premise that I like to look at and explain to people, honestly, in determining if a product's good or not is this something that people want? And is there not very much competition? Okay. Is this something that people want and is there not much competition? Now that not much, again, is subjective. Everybody's different. Everybody's appetite for competitiveness is different. But hear me out in this strategy that I have called the Marfan strategy, okay? Marfan, spelled M-A-R-F-A-N, is actually a medical syndrome, okay? A medical condition. It's not necessarily a disease. It's not something that can be diagnosed easily, but it's a syndrome. Some of the most prominent people that you may have heard of with Marfan syndrome would be Abraham Lincoln or the Olympic swimmer Michael Phelps. Also, we think my wife has it. Here's what's interesting about the Marfan syndrome, and here's why it relates so well to determining if an Amazon product is good, is there is actually no diagnosis for Marfan syndrome. There's not. There is no diagnosis. My wife went to a specialist to determine if she had it, and this is what it looked like. We walked into the office and they started going through this huge checklist, and you can see the checklist here. It's all sorts of information about, cardiovascular history, eye and skin, past surgical history, whether they've had skeletal issues, hernias, family history, all these things that I'm not sure how to spell. And then we get into these initial assessment findings. They have dislocated eye lenses or propensity for it. They have aortic aneurysms or a swollen aorta. Look at all of these different scores, right, that they put together. Calculate reduced upper segmentation, right? This means height, your lower segment, upper segment, height versus lower segment. So like, this is the way you're shaped. To break this down in simple terms, what this means is your wingspan wider or longer than your height? So are you wider than you are tall if you stretch your arms out, which is interesting. Check out these systemic features: plain flat foot, reduced upper segmentation, meaning I think this means a smaller torso than your lower body, all sorts of this stuff. And here's the deal. If you score higher or lower on some of these valuations, they could determine that we think you have Marfan syndrome. Okay. So you go through this whole checklist. Let's break it down. It's this whole checklist. Is this the case? Is this the case? Does this measure this? Does this do this? What's the value of this, right? And if they go through this entire list and enough of the indicators lean towards the fact that you probably have Marfan syndrome, they will probably diagnose you as having Marfan syndrome. There's not a blood test. There's not a DNA test. There's not, any sort of specific indicator of a thumbs up or a thumb down, Marfan, not Marfan. What you do is you look at all these little indicators and determine, we believe with fairly high certainty that you have Marfan syndrome, so we're going to treat it as Marfan syndrome. And if that's the case, we're going to do some things like occasional, tests on your heart to make sure your aorta is not getting weak and a few things like that. So it's important to know. But again, there's not a diagnosis. And folks, that's what a good Amazon product is. It's a Marfan syndrome product. It's a product that you're not going to get a definitive diagnosis. You're not going to get a definitive thumbs up or thumbs down saying, this is good, this isn't good. What we do is we look at many pieces of data as we can, right? We use gut instinct. We use competitive analysis. We use keyword search volume. And we essentially, at least I do it in my mind, build out this checklist of things and say, does this look like a Marfan product, right? And if I can get all the way through a ton of stuff that's saying, to me, this looks good, this looks good, this looks good, this doesn't scare me away, I kind of like this is a good sign, then at some point I have to make the decision, are we going to call this a Marfan syndrome product or not? And if it is, then I'm probably going to go ahead and try to launch it. Now, does that mean that every product that I launch is good? No, because there's no actual analysis. There's no definitive guide. But if I look at enough points of reference to get comfortable with the fact that I think this is going to be a good one, then I'll go ahead and move forward with it, right? I see so many people that actually look at really good products, potential products selling on Amazon, and they walk away because they didn't have that clear, concise indicator of, yes, this is exactly what you need to be selling. That's pretty tough, right? Because you're not going to get it. So my suggestion is start building a checklist of things that are important to you, things that are important to the potential success of your product. And if you can click off enough check boxes on that analysis that you believe with a fairly strong degree of certainty that you have a good product or a Marfan product, go ahead and try to launch it. If you're sitting around waiting for the perfect product to pop up, that's probably never going to happen. But I know a lot of people that miss opportunities for things that might have done well. On the other side, if you're feeling strongly about a product, emotionally, like, man, you really want to launch this, but you can't get a bunch of Marfan indicators, meaning you can't get enough, indicators to make yourself feel warm and fuzzy that it'll actually work, don't do it. We get as much data as we can, we get as many points of reference as we can, and then we make, honestly, the best guess that we can, right? Just like the doctors do with Marfan syndrome. They treat it like Marfan syndrome because they believe it is, but there's no truth. Or let me take it back, there's no certainty. There's no certainty. There's always truth. So I hope that kind of makes sense. I know this is a weird video because it's a lot of hypothetical stuff, but honestly, that's what a lot of business is hypothetical scenarios that we hope work out well, and we do the best that we can to reduce as much, stress and as much risk as we can when we move forward. But nothing's ever guaranteed. If you have any questions about my idea of this Marfan syndrome thing, post below, leave a comment, let me know. I'll get to you and answer those and make sure that we have a good response. This is something we talk a lot about in our group coaching program, mastermind program called the Centurion League. You can check it out at thecenturionleague.com. There's also a link below. And I hope you guys are crushing on Amazon. Thanks for watching another Amazon Armory video. We'll see you guys on the next one.